Hello, my friend, and welcome to the 407th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. We're getting back into storytelling. We had on number 404, Harry Major. He is the author of Story Selling. Today we've got Ty Bennett. He's a multiple author. The Power of Storytelling, The Power of Influence, Partnership is the New Leadership, the two most important days of your life. Super smart guy. Great story of how he launched his business, how he spun off or sold out of his business to move into the next step, how he did it with family and still has a family. So you're in for a treat. We've got Mike Mark coming up next. Really good story with him. Really interesting dude in the world of sales and persuasion and the mind. So you're in for a treat when that one comes up next. I've made some changes to the 30-day sales growth program. There is now a 6-month and a 12-month membership option that will give you some savings each month. The 12-month membership is still less expensive than what I paid for a 12-week course way back in 2005. And it had no video, no on-demand content, no private group. And with the 12-month option, you get a private consultation with me, which I do not even sell unless you're in a 90-day coaching program for thousands of dollars. So check that out, okay? 30daysalesgrowth.com. It's a heck of a deal. And now I want you to hear of a great deal from my sponsor, Intercom. What does insight-driven messaging look like for sales? Like a whole lot more deals, fast. Jump on high-intent leads in the moment with Intercom, the business messenger that extends the reach of your team 24/7. Intercom creates more opportunities for you by booking meetings and collecting data from leads automatically. Take Intercom user Elegant Themes. They now convert 25% of leads through Intercom's messenger. Deals don't wait. Get them with Intercom. Go to intercom.com/deals. That's intercom.com/deals. So there's a couple of good deals for you. I will have another one for you at the end of the show, so be sure to stick around. But now let's bring on our guest. Ty Bennett all the way from Utah with a good microphone and speaker now. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Got a little technical difficulties there. So what's happening, man? You and your brother start a business at 21. Your Utah's 40 under 40. You've written, 4 books now?
Yeah.
Is that right? Good grief. How have you been so prolific so early in your life?
Just trying to get after it. I've always been very entrepreneurial, and my brother and I both went to school studying entrepreneurship. And so I think it was kind of natural for us to start a business, and jumped into a business in direct sales. We licensed a nutritional supplement. We were selling to doctors and then through doctors' offices, and eventually scaled that to where we built out a sales team, recruited a lot of pharmaceutical and medical sales reps, and had great success with that business. And in the process, I found my role more and more was in training and developing our team, our leaders, our sales team, and really fell in love with that process. And so that's what led me to writing books and to speaking and to doing what I do now. I've since sold my half of that business to my brother. He's still running it, and gone on to start a speaking and training company. And that's where I spend most of my time.
And the benefit is you don't get noogies or wedgies from your brother anymore at work, right?
Well, honestly, it's been good for our relationship to kind of separate that out and let him do his thing and let me do my thing. And there are definitely good things. We had success with it, but there's also inherent problems that come with, trying to run a business together. So it's been good.
Yeah, cool. So what was your first book?
My first book was called The Power of Influence. And it was really all about how leaders, salespeople, primarily, I believe we're all in the people business. And so how do you build influential relationships with people? I tried to lay out some specific strategies for that and dive into it from that standpoint. Everything that I do, all of the work that I do really comes at it from the people side of how do you build influence? How do you build connection? How do you move people to action?
So are you mostly focused internal? How can a salesperson exert influence in today's, robo dial, caller ID, spammy world, fake social media.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do?
It's hard. I mean, we definitely have there are some barriers that we have to get past. I still think fundamentally business is about relationships. And, every business has its nuances in terms of how the sales process works and functions. But as we can develop deeper relationships with people, with those ongoing customers that we're serving, to get in the door and get past the gatekeeper and to really have honest and real conversations, that to me is where the magic happens. And so that's kind of my focus, is how do we get there? And part of that is the communication process. I wrote another book called The Power of Storytelling that is really all about how do we captivate with the message that we have so that we can influence for good.
So what is some of that magic? I just spent 2 days training client, 15 salespeople in marketing, and the natural correspondence that people want to send is just very generic, very fact focused, just easy to delete and forget. How do you take someone who's, they think, oh, hello, I am in business, I must be very robotic, and put some life into it?
Yeah. Well, I think storytelling is one of those skill sets that can stand out. It can take basic information and convey it in a way that's more interesting, that is more memorable. I'm often brought into different groups. As you were saying that, in a couple of weeks, I'll be in Barcelona with a group that I had a call with their CEO on Friday. And he said, we're really good at the boring, here's the facts, here's exactly who we are, what we do. We're not really good at anything beyond that to stand out and to be memorable. And if we're going in and we're one of 6 groups pitching them, we give them a lot of facts and that's about it. And I think that's pretty natural because we know that we have to have that in there. But how do we add color to it, right? How do we make it more compelling, more dynamic, more memorable? And stories are such a natural way to do that. A basic functionality, if you start to think about it from that standpoint, is the facts that you're presenting, the solutions that you're presenting come in to address a struggle. Well, if you can extrapolate that struggle to solution as a broader concept and construct a story around it, typically, I would say that the more personal it is, the more powerful it is. And so if you can share your own experience or someone close to you or one of your clients that you've worked with that they can relate to and connect with, you're just building out the same facts and figures within the context of someone's experience, which makes it more palatable.
I mean, we know that, right? And when we're away from work, we're telling stories.
For sure.
Right. It's natural. I think it's in our DNA. I mean, since cavemen were drawing on walls, right? But why do we forget it in business? And how, do salespeople need permission from their boss? Is it a bottom up? Is it a top down sort of thing where, do I just tell a bunch of case studies and to personalize it?
So I think there's probably multiple factors. One is the speed of business, right? We know that we're vying for people's time. And so if you start to think about, if I add a story, we think it's going to take tons of time. And I'm not saying that at all. I don't think you need to turn a 15-minute presentation into 30 minutes because you want to add a bunch of stories. But you could add a 2-minute story, an anecdote around a specific topic that draws it out. And there's different ways you can do that. You can bring a story in that introduces an idea, or you can share the idea and say, one of the things we do is this. In fact, last week I was working with this group and give a quick case study or a quick story of the application of that. I think one is the lack of understanding of it, and 2 is the lack of skill in it. We naturally tell stories, but as we tell stories, we aren't judged on those stories the same way when you're telling a story to your friends or to your kids or just sitting around talking in normal situations. I think we have to put some work into it the same way we put work into understanding the facts and the figures and the presentation that we want to give to someone, flush out some of those stories, practice them, even role play them, script them out so that we can deliver them in a very effective, concise, compelling manner.
That ain't going to happen. I guess that's why you and I have a job, huh? 'Cause I just don't see it happening. I mean, not across the board, right? The smarter ones do, and those are the ones that succeed. But why does everybody think do we get in business and just they insert a stick up our butt? Like, is that just normal?
Well, unfortunately, though, you start to...
Here's your desk. Here's your BlackBerry. Yes, we still use BlackBerries. How about that? And here, please bend over because we got to put the stick up your butt. Is that just what they do?
So here's the thing that's funny is you watch some people who get into certain situations and they lose their personality, which is so unfortunate, especially in the sales process, right? To be able to connect and engage and be enjoyable and likable, you've got to bring those qualities to the table. And so, the idea of storytelling, it's interesting now, having written this book and spoken to hundreds of audiences on the idea of storytelling, is you get a mix across the board. There are people who buy in, love it, are killing it in storytelling, want to know how do I tweak it, how to make my stories a little bit better. Those people are typically really top performers. Sometimes I'm brought into, the president's circle or whatever to speak to that group. Then you have the company that says, you know what, here's storytelling. What you're saying is, I get it. You're right. I should do more of that. I'm probably not. Maybe I should, figure out where I can fit that in. And then you have the other group that's like, you know what? I don't even spend any time there because I'm so focused in this specific arena. And it's almost like a new concept to them, which is funny because that's just how we communicate anyway. But stories connect the human element in the sales process. They make it more real. I could go through study after study of all the things it does chemically to the brain, the way that people connect with it, the way that people remember it. They work. You can't dispute that. But it's human nature that we either get lazy or apathetic, or we focus on the things that don't work as well for whatever reason. And I think part of my role is to remind people that stories are a tool that you should be using.
How did you learn this art?
So for me, as I was struggling as a young entrepreneur presenting to people, I had a friend who recommended that I record every presentation that I gave, which I started doing. It was unbelievably painful to listen to. And as I listened to, hundreds of my presentations of myself presenting to people, having conversations. This was back in the day. I went to Radio Shack, got one of those little recorder things, stuck it in my pocket, meeting face to face, or had a connection for my phone. And what I started to ask was the question was, what caused people to engage? When people listened, when they responded more, when they laughed, when they asked more questions, and inevitably I was telling stories. And so it just registered with me that I needed to work on that. So I started to study storytelling. I started to practice it and flush it out. And eventually it became a skill set that I feel more and more proficient in. And then as I started speaking on the power of influence, primarily my first book, people started to ask me about storytelling, natural way of presenting. And so I sat down and flushed out what I had been using, what I had learned for myself. And that's what turned into the power of storytelling.
Yeah, I tell people this all the time. Record yourself, right? When I got serious about golf, my dad got me golf lessons when I was 23. And after a few months, I went to a golf pro and he filmed me. I think I hit like 5 shots. This was 1993. So he filmed me from above, from in front, and from behind. So that was like advanced for 1993.
Yeah.
But 5 swings of the golf club and then 30 minutes of analyzing. And he sent me home with a VHS tape annotated, right, with the angles and the lines so I could teach myself. When I got serious about speaking, I went to this course and had to drive into downtown LA for 2 days. Give a speech, record yourself, same thing, VHS. We have to go sit alone in a little cubicle and watch ourselves. When I hired a sales coach, he made me buy this device that recorded my calls. And then he would break them down, and they were terrible. I'd already been in sales for a decade, making $100,000 a year at least. So I was making money, but man, I was just brute forcing things. Right? I did the same. I bought an Olympus WS110, I think it was, a little bitty recorder, and I would just record my own presentation. I still use it as a backup. And somebody wants to get better when they're willing to record themselves.
Yeah. And it's so painful, but yeah, there's nothing else like it. Like I start doing this with my kids. My boys they compete in American Ninja Warrior. And so they're always doing these different obstacles. And I'll sit and when they're working on a new one, I'll record them and then they sit and watch it. And I'm like, look at what you did. I mean, just watching form and seeing yourself, there's nothing better than really getting an actual shot of what is you're doing. It's eye opening, especially for salespeople. First time you ever do that, you are not presenting the way you think you are presenting.
Right.
You don't look the way you think you do, your facial expressions, the confidence that you think you're exhibiting. It's so different when you see the reality of it.
Yeah, for sure. So how old were you when you sold out to your brother?
So I kind of stepped away at age 30. And then at 32 is when we finalized an agreement for him to buy me out.
So did you know you wanted to get right into speaking and coaching?
Yeah, that's kind of why I stepped away. I started working on my first book, and that came out in 2000 and at the end of 2010, basically 2011. And I started speaking and kind of took off pretty quickly. And so my natural skill set is more of speaking than writing. I think they go hand in hand, and writing's been a great medium for me to kind of crystallize thoughts, but I definitely view myself more as a speaker. That is more of my passion. And so I wrote my first book really to kind of get out there speaking, and just fell in love with the process really quickly. And so it became apparent that, that's what I wanted to pursue.
How did you get that first speaking gig? Did you hire an agency? Did you just promote yourself?
Yeah. So at first, the very first speaking engagements that I got, I had some friends who, like one of my best friends started this fitness company, and I spoke for them for free a couple of times for some of the things that they were doing. And someone who was in that group hired me to come and speak to his sales team. And another person who was in that group, like 3 days later, her aunt was sitting at dinner with her and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a speaker for this event for these government workers that I'm in charge of this conference. Do you have any idea? Do you guys know any speakers?" Just said this to the whole family gathering. And she said, "Actually, yeah, this guy I saw the other day." And so that led to my, a speaking engagement that I probably got paid $500 or something. And, but then there were some other people I'd met in previous business that I started sending books out to and reaching out to, and led to some other engagements. So it started with me. As the business started to take off, I started to bring on staff, and then about 3 years into it, I signed with an agency that I've been with now for the last 6.5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, though. Just put it out there. I always say people don't do business with you for one of two reasons. Either they haven't heard of you or they have. Right? So put yourself out there.
Yeah.
So are you primarily a speaker, primarily a consultant or coach, or all the above?
I'm primarily a speaker. I do about 100 keynote speeches a year. And then I do some coaching and consulting. I currently am a consultant with 2 executive teams that I'm doing some ongoing work with, and then some coaching here and there. But yeah, primarily I'm speaking and training.
Yep. Very cool. So what are you seeing? What are companies struggling with today? When do you go on site with them? Or are you remote? A little bit of both?
Yeah, many times I'm on site. Sometimes their conferences are, a destination locations, that kind of thing. But I'm always diving in with their teams beforehand. So, I think across the board, you're seeing some of the same things that manifest themselves. I'm brought in to speak in the sales arena on how to use stories as a skill or a tool to build more influence, and as another layer to the sales training that they already currently have. In the sales process, you see all the same things of trying to build connection, trying to get in the door, trying to close more deals, trying to extend that relationship so that it goes beyond transactional to, ongoing relational. In the leadership realm, I'm brought in to help people understand how to lead more effectively, how to influence more effectively, and gain commitment from their people. And so, from a morale and employee engagement standpoint, turnover is very high in certain places. And, I think that continues to be part of the world that we live in, right? People change jobs way more often now than they used to. I think there's many factors to that, one of which is that our world is just more connected. And so if leaders don't do a good job and create a great environment, people know that there are other options out there. And so they're constantly looking. I mean, yesterday I was at a neighbor's birthday party and I had 3 different people, and I get it's part of what I do, so they're going to bring up this in conversation with me. But 3 different people talked about how they had just left jobs recently because of a bad boss. And just it wasn't worth it, and talked about how excited they were about the new opportunity they had because they loved the people they were working with. And that stuff means so much to the ongoing viability of an organization, and the productivity of an organization is how the leaders show up, how we interact with each other, the team, the unity that we build.
So we need to include free lattes and vegan lunches, right, to create that positive environment. Is that the key?
Well, I think those things are all perks and they help. And some people that means more than others. But ultimately, I think the things that we can completely control are the relationships that we build, the trust that's there. If people feel like they have a voice in the organization, if people feel like they are cared about. I mean, some of those things that, we need to get business done, and I'm not saying we don't, but the leaders who forget that they lead people and not just are after a number or process, they lose people more often, and people just aren't happy and feel safe and welcome in that environment. And because of that, it affects turnover, which affects huge things in the organization.
Right. How does a driver do that, right? Like when it comes to work, I'm a hard charger.
Yeah.
Right? I get after it. There's no music on in my office here. There's no TV. Something has to be done. I don't care. Get up at 4, do it. Stay till midnight, do it. I mean, I'm going to get it done. And how you see a lot of times in company, right? If you look at the DISC assessment, the leader's going to be maybe a little more goal or task oriented versus people oriented. How does that hard charging driver tone it down and make the I's and the S's feel loved and welcomed?
Well, I think for all of us, it's a constant refinement process. I fall more along the lines of where you are. There's times that I know I kind of just bulldoze over people and don't have the patience to say, because I want to get the job done. That's my natural bent. But I also know that as I consciously recognize where I need to spend some time and prioritize some of those things as well, then I can be more effective and a little bit more well-rounded in the position that I have. And so I do think that all of us adapt and we change a little bit. I think also I'm a huge fan of having open and real conversations. And if you were my leader and you openly say, you know what, this is how I operate, this is how I function. There's sometimes that, I may be a little bit, feels like I'm just focused in this area and I'm not there for you. Just call me on it and just say, hey, I need you to help me out here, or I need to sit down and have a conversation with me. Like those open, real conversations where we can assess each other and be open and vulnerable and about who we are and what works and what doesn't. Those things make a big difference. I think that transparency opens the door to have conversations.
Do companies now, does leadership include being woke? Right? You see Gillette with these ads, you see Nike with the ads, and it seems to work for Nike, although I think they were a little clearer on who they wanted to go after and who they were willing to lose. I just saw news today, and it happened about a month ago. Gillette comes out with that ad for be the best you can be, or something like that in January. And in July, it's an $8 billion write-down on Gillette. So maybe they picked the wrong audience. But, does leadership mean being woke, taking on some cause, or can you stick to the facts and still lead?
I think you can. I think, you look at those two examples you gave, and if you do take a cause, you have kind of a crusade and something that you're pushing, there's going to be just the reality of it in how you do that. You're going to attract some and you're going to lose some along the way, right? It's more polarizing when you take that stand in that position. So I think leaders can navigate that how they feel, but I also think our world is somewhat that way. We're so reactive right now, and so leadership, the old adage would say leadership's lonely at the top, and I don't think you have to approach leadership that way. But I do think that in our world today, you have to recognize that as a leader, it's not always going to be perfect. You're not always going to win everybody over, and it's not always going to be nice and easy in the process. The thing that I hope leaders are willing to do is that they're willing to put in that extra effort, and that extra effort many times is having the tough conversations to work through some of these things to get to the other side.
Right. How often, or how does it work, like, hey, it's my way or the highway, or I set the pace, you try to keep up, versus I'm going to meet you where you are and nurture you along?
Well, I think every organization has to decide that, right, in terms of the development process and where they want to meet their people, and how much time they want to invest in certain people before they decide if they fit or they don't. Ultimately, though, I think my view of leadership is a leader should progressively make themselves less and less needed by the development of their people. So the book that I'm currently working on is all about how leaders build leaders on their team, the mentorship process. Because I think we look at that, and there's different, even if you just take the idea of micromanagement versus macromanagement, there are some people that just think micromanagement is a horribly bad word. But the truth is, when somebody's new and somebody doesn't have the skill set yet, or they're new in the organization, a leader needs to take that person by the hand and show them how the process works, with the end result of teaching them and training them so that they are equipped to be able to do it on their own and move towards that macro management level. So I do think there's a place for both. I think that's part of the challenge of leadership, is to assess those situations, figure out the right approach, and also choose when it's worth it to invest in people and when it's not. That's the people business of this, where it's not just systematic of here's how you do this every day and here's how you approach this situation. It's being able to read people, being able to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and figure out where they fit into the goals of the organization and if they fit.
Should companies hire all experienced salespeople, or hire for culture and then train the heck out of them? What makes a better salesperson?
Well, I've interviewed, so for my book, Partnership is the New Leadership, I interviewed hundreds of CEOs, and virtually every one of them said something to the effect of, you hire for culture and you train for skill. Across the board, I think, that's the case. Now, if you can find somebody who already has skill, but also is willing to fit culture, you speed up the process. If you can hire A players that, are willing to jump in and adapt, the hard part is for many people unlearning, right? If you've got a certain way of doing things, changing that sometimes is tough. And I'm a big fan of long-term businesses, long-term. And so culture matters, because in the end, the short-term wins if they're costing you too much on the culture side and the and you're losing good people because of it, it doesn't pay off in the end. So I definitely fall on the side of, culture is probably the first priority, but if you can find people that brings a skill set to the table and are already ready to run, awesome.
Right. Very cool. So, man, you got 4 books. You're working on a 5th. You're speaking. I mean, where do people learn more about you and to hire you, pick your brain, whatever?
My website's just my name, tybennett.com, and pretty easy to find on social media at Ty Bennett everywhere as well. And just love to connect with people. But my goal is to share content and ideas that help leaders and salespeople to be relevant, to be influential and successful. And so, hopefully we do that through the books, through speaking, coaching, the podcast that I host, and the things that we get to do.
Right. Okay, cool. I'm linking to that. I've got your books as well on the sites here, so they can check that out. Easy to buy. Well, man, Ty Bennett, all the way from Utah. Thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, man. Have a great day.
See ya.
So do not let them put a stick up your butt, okay? And if it's already there, pull the thing out. Just rip the Band-Aid out. Like the movies, bite a stick, bite your belt, whatever. Rip it out. Stop letting people do that to you. It just ain't right. Tell stories. Have some personality. And you can use humor. I think you got to be careful with it. It's like dynamite. A little bit goes a long way. Be careful not to use humor in a negotiation setting, or at least be very careful with it, because it diffuses the situation. Sometimes you need your prospect to feel uncomfortable. They need to feel the pressure. So be careful with throwing in humor that may be your own coping mechanism, right? So be careful with that. If you can't stand the heat, get into the 30-Day Sales Growth Kitchen, all right? I'll help you with the heat. 30daysalesgrowth.com. Go join for a year. It's the most affordable, best value, and you get a private consultation with me. So that's not the deal I was talking about, though, before we get into the episode. I want you to check out an email cleaning tool. I've got 20,000 contacts, at least in my database, and I had not done a true scrubbing of my list in years. There are things called spam traps. There are people that are identified as complainers. There are a lot of things that people use, like throwaway email addresses, to get around your system. If you want to improve your deliverability and do it affordably, go to thesaleswhisperer.com/K13. Okay? thesaleswhisperer.com/K13. Check that out. You can buy a bulk of cleaning contacts, right? You buy based on the number of emails that you have, and you upload them. It cleans it. It identifies everyone, and then you can import or delete, according to what that list says. And then about once a month, they recommend just clean your new contacts. So check that out, thesaleswhisperer.com/K13. Get your email list cleaned, because your email list is truly the only thing you own in a marketing capacity. You don't own your Facebook page, your Twitter profile, your Instagram account. You don't own any of that, but you own your list. Okay? And make sure it's clean. Make sure it is valuable. Make sure you are leveraging it. Out of sight, out of mind. What are you doing to stay in touch with those folks? Are you telling them stories? Okay. If you need help with any of that, join the 30-Day Sales Growth Program. I get into all that. You get a copy of my book, live weekly calls. I'll answer any question you've got. I've been doing this sales for 22 years, providing for a family of 9 on a sole income, right? I might know a thing or two about selling. So come join us. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll go sell something.